We appreciate the time that John has given us and and your time. So we don't want to abuse that. Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate is pleased to present to have John Tutor with us tonight for this presentation on the important rules relating to Proposition 19 and its impact on real estate transfers in California. John is well, he's been in the tax assessor probably as long as I've been a realtor. So and knows this topic very well. So we will keep all of our viewers on mute in terms of discussion, but please do put any questions you have in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that and letting John know of questions as they come up. He expects his presentation will take about 20 minutes, and then he'll be open for questions thereafter until we're done answering the questions. So thanks again for attending, and John, thank you for being here to present this, and turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Garrett, and welcome everybody. Let me just give you a disclaimer. I'm the Napa County assessor. I'm not the assessor of any other county in California. So each county has its own interpretation of the rules and their procedures for handling Proposition 19 applications. So please, if you're a resident of a different county, then make sure that you get in contact with the assessor in your county for specific questions and guidance on doing Proposition 19. I was active in the discussions about Proposition 19 on behalf of the California Assessors Association. We are implementing it. It's not a perfect proposition, as most of them are not. The voters voted it in, and it had two main components. One was the base year transfer between counties throughout California, where people over 55 or who were severely disabled could move their base year value from one county to another, and we'll go into that as part of a slideshow. And then the second part had to do with changing the parent-to-child exclusion that had been passed by the voters in 1986 and then was severely amended by Proposition 19. It was something most people who voted for it didn't realize they were voting for. But we'll go into that. And to date, there's been no easy attempt to try and overcome what is the negative parts of Proposition 19 vis-a-vis the parent-to-child exclusion and the grandparent-to-grandchild exclusion. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat. I'm going to share my screen and make sure everybody can see it. And Garrett, I'll rely on you to make sure that you can see the Prop.
Yes, we can see the screen, John. It looks just fine.
All right, great. So this slideshow was put together back right after Proposition 19 was passed, and it's not substantially different now than it was then. There have been a few minor changes, but nothing that changes the major aspects of the proposition, as I'll be going through with you. And I do want to say that, again, just to reiterate, you must deal with your local assessor in terms of their specific rules and guidelines for adopting Proposition 19. So with that, let me get started. So there was a base year transfer from some counties to other counties, and for years, both a regular base year transfer and then a calamity transfer. The Proposition 19 expanded that to all 58 counties. So you can own a property that was your original principal residence in any county in California. And once you turn 55, and that has to be 55 on the day you sell your original residence, not on the day you buy your replacement residence. So, and I normally recommend that since this is, each person can do this 3 times. So I usually recommend that if it's a couple, the older party to the couple be the first applicant, because only one person needs to apply. So each member of a couple have 3 opportunities. And if you start with the oldest, the younger may have opportunities when the oldest is no longer part of the scene. So I usually recommend that the older member of a couple be the applicant or the claimant as this goes forward. We've had very few applications from severely disabled people. It doesn't matter how old you are, but if you meet the requirements for severe disability, you can apply to move your base year from any county in California to any other county in California. Now, the big change from the prior base year transfer, which was Proposition 60, is that you can now buy up. Before you had to buy equal or lesser, but now you can buy up. So you can sell a home in San Diego County for $2 million and buy a home in Napa County for $3 million. And I'll explain how that works. But you're no longer limited to buying a property that's equal to or less than value. And if you sell first and buy later, you still get that extra benefit of a 5% cushion. So if you sell for $1 million in the first year and don't buy if you sell for $1 million and in the first year you buy for $1,050,000, your original million gets a 5% break, and therefore you're not buying up because your original became $1,050,000 and what you bought is $1,050,000. If you wait a year into the second year to buy, you get a 10% benefit, which would mean $1,100,000 to compare to whatever you pay for your replacement property. If you buy first, if you buy your replacement and then move your value to after you sell your original, there is no buffer of any kind, just so you know that. Now, here's an example that I'm going to go through. So as I mentioned, you sell in San Diego County for $2 million, and your replacement in Napa County costs $3 million. The base year of your original was $500,000, and your transferred base year will be $500,000 plus $1 million or $1,500,000, saving $15,000 in taxes. So the difference between $2 million and $3 million is $1 million, and we add that to the $500,000, so you're now at $1,500,000 instead of $3 million. So you're still saving $15,000 a year. And not to complicate this too much, but if you sell first and then buy, that $2 million gets a 5% break in the first year. So if you buy and sell on the same day, that's considered not the same day. It's considered part of that first year. So then you'd have $2,100,000, and the difference to $3 million would only be $900,000, therefore saving you even more money. Then the next part of this, you move your base year without adjustment if your replacement purchase price is less than the sale price of the original. One leg of the transaction, and this is no longer really relevant, it had to be after April 1st of 2021, and the other transaction cannot occur more than 2 years before April 1st, 2021. Well, we're so far beyond that now that the earliest you can qualify is if you sold, today is March 6th of 2024, so you could still qualify if you sold on March 7th of 2022, but that's now the earliest date you can reach back to. You can also qualify if you bought a replacement in March 2022 and you sold your original by March 5th of 2024. So those 2 years now are running along. And if you sell on March 5th of 2024, you have until March 4th of 2026 to buy your replacement. So the 2 years runs in either direction, from the date you sell your original or the day you buy your replacement. And if you're a second or third time transferor of your base year value, you're going to get the base year value after adjustment. So in that first case that I talked about, where the transfer was 500,000 in San Diego, and it's now $1.5 million in Napa, if you transfer again, it's going to be the $1.5 million from Napa that you're transferring, not your original 500,000 that you had in San Diego. And of course, if you buy your replacement first, and this is very important, you're going to pay the higher taxes in the new county until you sell your original. It's only after you sell. So let's say you're 53 years old and a day, and you decide to buy a replacement in Napa County, and you wait the full 2 years almost to sell when you turn 55, you're going to pay the higher taxes in Napa County for those 2 years. The day you sell the original is the day we're going to move your base year value for you. And from that point forward, you'll be enjoying the benefits of Proposition 19 in terms of the lower taxes that moving your base year will have for you. Now, Prop 19 also applies to calamities. Before, only certain counties allowed people who lost their home for any reason, flood, earthquake, fire, to move to their county. Now, every county can allow you to move your base year value in terms of a calamity. And I'm hoping nobody on the call is the part of someone who has suffered a calamity. But again, it's the 2 years from the date of sale of the destroyed property, not from the date that it was destroyed. So if you had something destroyed in the 2020 glass fire in Napa County or one of the fires in Sonoma County, it's not until you sell the destroyed property that the 2 years starts running. And it's at the time you sell it, you're going to need to get a value for the property on the day before it was destroyed. That's going to be the value that's compared to what you're paying for the replacement property in the county to which you take your base year value. Now, we often recommend that someone use a realtor. You don't have to have a full appraisal. Garrett knows from his long time in the real estate business that realtors often will do what's called either a broker's professional opinion. It's also called a comparative market analysis. And those are no cost because the realtor, excuse me, is looking to build goodwill with the possible future client. Those are not necessarily binding on the assessor, but they're very helpful for the assessor. So say you lost a home in the 2021 or 2020 fires in Napa County, you don't sell your property until 2024, you'll need a realtor, CMA, comparative market analysis, or BPO, a broker's professional opinion, to come up with a value that'll give you an idea of what you're going to be able to purchase as your replacement and still move your base year value. And again, you can buy up, but this time there's no adjustments. It's just 100% of what the property was worth on the day before it burned down. And as I say here in the last sentence of this slide, people from the 2020 fires, if they still in Napa County, and even the 2017 fires, if you still own that destroyed property, you can still qualify for a base year transfer within 2 years of the date that you sell that property. So if you've held on to property for now 7 years after the October 2017 fires and you still have it, and you decide you're not going to rebuild, you want to move to another county, it's the day you sell that destroyed property, not the day it burned down, that starts the 2-year clock running to buy the replacement. Now, by the same token, and you better be aware of this, if you bought a replacement property, you've got to sell the destroyed property within 2 years of the date you bought the replacement property, or you can't do that. So if somebody bought a replacement property, thought they'd hold on to the other, say in May of 2022, and thought they'd hold on to their other property for their kids, and then decided, no, we're not going to do that, they have to sell by April of 2024 in order to move their base year value from the destroyed property to the replacement property they bought. So those are the two main parts of the Prop 19 as related to a base year transfer. And I'm sure there'll be some questions I can answer that people want to talk about. Let's now talk about the second part of Proposition 19. Now, let me give you a little background. In the old parent to child, which was called Proposition 58, and the grandparent to grandchild, which was Proposition 173, there were several things. You could transfer a principal residence and there was no value issue at all. You could transfer commercial, rental properties, agricultural properties, any other kind of property. You didn't have to live in it. And that you would get a certain amount of credit against $1 million. That $1 million can be confusing. All of that went away with Proposition 19. And the reason it went away is Proposition 19 was a compromise between the real estate industry, who wanted to promote base year transfers for the benefit of their clients and also for their benefit, because it makes the market a lot easier if you know you can move your base year. But the other side of the coin was people was worried about the impact that was going to have on property tax revenues for fire and police and all of those kinds of things. So the legislature came up with this idea to severely limit the parent to child and grandparent to grandchild in order that there would be offsetting revenue to not have the base year transfer chip away at the total assessed value and total tax revenues of the counties and cities in California. So that's why the parent to child was so severely restricted. So now the parent to child and the grandparent to grandchild only applies to 2 instances. It no longer covers rental property. It no longer covers commercial property. It no longer covers industrial property. It only covers 2 things: the principal residence of the person who is passing the property on. It can be a parent to a child. It can be a child to a parent, and vice versa. And it also applies in certain situations to family farms. And family farms are defined as something being in productive agriculture. And I'm going to go through those with one example here, because when you have a family farm that also has the parent's principal residence on it, then it becomes very important that we decide which is principal residence and which is family farm. And that's the example I'm going to give you. One other thing that I do need to point out about the base year transfer, let me just go back for 1 minute to emphasize that. It is only for a principal residence. That is all it's for. The base year transfer does not apply to rental properties. It does not apply to any other kind of property. It has to be the principal residence of the person who's going to move their base year value. And that is also true of the Prop 19 parent to child. It's no longer called parent to child. It's now called intergenerational. But here's how it works. So let's just look at the bottom example here on this slide. So let's pretend there's no farm involved. It's just a principal residence. So in the past, you could transfer a principal residence that was worth $10 million to your child and there'd be no adjustment. They'd get your old base year value regardless of what the house was worth. And that's part of what triggered this change in Proposition 19 was the fact that children were inheriting homes that they could be rentals, they could be principal residences, and were never paying the higher taxes, even though they were getting income based on the current rental market, not based on what the base year value was of the house. So that was one of the reasons that this was changed. So now, even if it's your principal residence, there is an adjustment. So let me go through that in this example. So the base year of the principal residence and home site, and a principal residence includes the land under it. It can include a swimming pool, a tennis court. It can even include what's an accessory dwelling unit. So a second unit, if that's what's on the property at the time that it transfers. But it's not anything else. It doesn't include if there's a second home on the property that is not an ADU. It doesn't include various other things that might be on the property, like a big workshop or a commercial business that's on the same parcel. Those will be adjusted out and will get a new base year value. But the home itself and the land under it and things considered part of a residential, like a swimming pool or a tennis court, those are included in that. So let's say the base year value of this principal residence was $450,000. Now you are not limited to what the value is of that property, but what happens is, let's say the property is worth $2,500,000 at the time that the parent transfers it. That's whether by gift or by inheritance or by sale. The child gets a benefit of $1 million. That's now increasing every 2 years. So now it's about $1,057,000, but I won't make that too complicated. So you take the base year value of the home at $450,000, which used to go no matter what the value of the house was on the date it was transferred. And now you add that $1 million buffer to it. So the value after the transfer is 2.5 million minus the base year plus that $1 million buffer, which gives you $1,050,000 plus $450,000, and that's $1,500,000. So instead of 2.5 million, the child is getting the home at 1.5 million, and it's still essentially saving $10,000 a year in property taxes, which is what that $1 million buffer that gets added adds up to. So there's still a benefit. It's just not like it was when the difference was between 450,000 and 2.5 million, and the child was getting a $2,050,000 benefit, or almost $20,000, or more than $20,000 in tax savings. Now they're only getting $10,000 in tax savings. So that is the principal residence part of the intergenerational, and that's true if it's grandparent to grandchild or parent to child or vice versa. With the grandparent to grandchild, one change that was made was that both of the parents of the child, i.e. the child of the grandparent, both have to be deceased in order for the new grandparent to grandchild to take place. And then the same formula applies to that. So you have to be very careful if you're in a family situation that if the parent is still alive, you don't want to go directly from the grandparent to the grandchild. You want to make it a two-step process, which is legal, where the grandparent gives to their child, not their grandchild, and then in turn, that child, the parent of the grandchild, does a second transfer to the child. That will bring that into play. So now let's talk about the family farm. Let's just pretend this is a 28-acre vineyard in the Napa Valley. The fair market value of the vineyard is $350,000 an acre for $9.8 million. The Proposition 13 base year value of the vineyard was $2.5 million at the time this transfer took place, whether by inheritance, sale, or gift. There's still that $1 million benefit. So now the base year value is $2.5 million plus the $1 million. And then you take 9.8 million and deduct the 3.5 million, and you get 6.3 million plus the 2.5 million is 8.8 million is the new base year value. So the child in the past, if this had been under the old parent to child, they would have gotten the benefit all the way from 2.5 million to 9.8 million, which is like a $73,000 tax savings. Now they only get that $1 million buffer, and their tax savings are still about $10,000 a year, but they're not where they were in the past. And it's pretty clear that this applies to all kinds of farm properties. It apparently can be leased. So if you have a vineyard that you own, but it's leased, that doesn't matter to someone who owns the vines and pays you a rental for and part of the crop. And it also doesn't appear to matter if the child or the parent was the main manager of the property. That doesn't seem to make a difference. And it, of course, if it's bare land or just vineyard land, and it can be grazing land, it's not just vineyard. Productive agriculture has a lot of definitions. It includes orchards, row crops, cattle ranches, and vineyards and other kinds of more developed agricultural property. It probably does not include a property with a winery on it. If there was a winery on it, that's considered industrial and not agricultural. So the winery portion of that would be fully reassessed. But if there were vineyard or other agricultural use on the property, the child would get the benefit of that, at least $10,000 if they use this provision. So I think with that, if you want to have your papers and pencils or your cameras out, this is my contact information. I am happy to answer questions anywhere in California, but always with the proviso that my answer is for what I know about Napa County and may not apply if you're moving, say, from Napa County to Contra Costa County or to Alameda County. I can't guarantee you that my colleague there is going to use exactly the same format or procedures that we use. One other thing I want to mention, the claim form for the base year transfer, I want to go back to that, is you have to supply both the claim form, a picture of your California driver's license to confirm how old you are, which has your birth date on it, and the most recent tax bill from the county from which you're bringing your base year transfer. So if you sold in March of 2022 and you're now buying before it expires in March of 2024, you'll need a copy of your 2022-2023 tax bill in order to attach that. And most of those bills are now online in most counties if you didn't keep it in your file after you sold the property. So with that, let me just bring up my contact information again. And as I said, I went a little over the 20 minutes, but not much, and I'd be happy to answer questions. I can look at the chat myself. So let me just do that, and let me see what we've got in there. Oh, I see. I got to stop sharing my screen. So let's see. All right. So I see several things in the chat. We had a good question. Was what about a stock transfer of a corporation or LLC that holds a principal residence only? The answer is they do not qualify. It must be a homeowner An LLC is not it is an owner, but it's not a live person. So it doesn't matter what kind of corporation, if it's an LLC or a corporation or a partnership, that would not qualify. Now you can take it out of the LLC and put it into the name of the owners. That's perfectly acceptable, as long as the owners of the LLC and the person who owns the property are the same. That is okay, but you can't transfer a base year value from a property that is owned by an LLC, even if it's the principal residence of the owner. And for that same reason, if it's in an LLC, it can't get a homeowner's exemption. And I do want to stress, you do need, if you're thinking of buying, or if you're thinking of selling your original residence, you want to make sure you have your homeowner's exemption in your home county where you're going to be selling. You can get it the day before you sell, but you should have it. And about 20% of all eligible principal residence homeowners in California don't have their homeowner's exemption. So pull out your last tax bill, the one that's due on April 10th, and make sure if it shows you have a homeowner's exemption on it, there'll be a $7,000 exemption shown. And by the way, this also applies, and I hope there aren't very many of them because it's a terrible position to be in, but this also applies to a disabled veterans exemption. So if you live in a home and it's your principal residence and you have a disabled veterans exemption, you also qualify to move your base year value anywhere in California. It sort of matters. The second part of the question about the family farm was, does it matter if the farm doesn't sell their products commercially? Well, when you say productive agriculture, production often means sales. So it would be a pretty hard sell to qualify in any county, something that you just, you raise sheep for pets, you don't sell their wool, you don't sell their meat, or if you have a landscape vineyard, as we call it, which is really less than an acre. So it does matter. The farm, to be productive, should be selling its product. So the second question was, is there a percentage calculation for the benefit of the property is valued at 1 million or less? In both of your examples of parent to child, you are giving a $1 million benefit. The answer to that is that 1 million, which is escalating every 2 years, is fixed. And so it gets added to whatever your base year value is. So going back to that other example, let me just run back there. So I won't go back there because I stopped sharing my screen. But in any case, in that example, I used $2.5 million, but if the house was only, so the base year value was $450. At the time of the transfer, the house was only worth $1,350,000. Then you take 450, you add $1 million, that's more than the fair market value of $1,350,000. So there's no adjustment. The child gets the property at the $450,000 base year value because they didn't go above that $1 million buffer. Another question was, what about a revocable trust? Yes, the trust doesn't affect anything. You don't have to take it out of the trust. You can sell your original or buy your replacement within the confines of your trust. A trust is just sort of a envelope around you. You still are the homeowner. It can't be a trust inside an LLC, but just if it's a regular trust and it shows as John Jones and Jane Jones, trustees of the Jones Revocable Trust, they can both buy and sell within the trust. And that sort of exhausted what I see in the chat. I'm happy to wait a few minutes. And Garrett, I'm going to see if you had anything you wanted to add, and I'll watch the chat while you're back on.
I just want to say your knowledge on this is inspiring to me that you have all these facts and information at your total recall. So that's great. And
I
here
do
we
have
go.
one more question. I do want
Yeah.
to say one thing. I have been the assessor. I'm in my 37th year now. I don't know if I beat you, Garrett, but I've been with the county and I'm in my 46th year, so I've been at it all the time. But my job as assessor, I've always said it is that no one pays more property taxes than they should. My job's to be fair, not to raise money, and that's why I do. And I appreciate Garrett's having invited me to do this. The more information you have, the more informed you are as a property owner. We're going to be sure that you're treated fairly and that you have enough information to make the right decision. I did get a question which is correct. So we have had the question was, what about a successor trustee who is a child who lives with their elderly parents in the principal residence? That's one other thing I forgot to mention, and thank you for that question. Not only does the property have to be the principal residence of the parents, the child has to move in. The child has to make it their principal residence. Thank you for raising it. I forgot to stress that. And now if there are 3 children, it can be left all 3 of them, but one of them has to live in the house. And that child can move out and another child move in. But one of the children is going to have to live in that house for as long as they own it. If they move out, the day they move out, we reinstall that fair market value at the time that it was transferred to them, because they no longer qualify. So you don't just have to qualify at the time the transfer takes place. You have to live in the property. One of the siblings or one of the heirs has to live in the property to continue the exclusion. The moment you move out, you've lost the exclusion, and from that point forward, we're going to raise the value of the property to what it would have been if you've never had the exclusion in the first place. And to answer the question now, yes, a child can live with their parent as long as it was their principal resident and they pass it on, as long as the child, they can't have a homeowners because they're not on title, but the moment it transfers to them, either by inheritance or by gift or by sale, they then are eligible for a homeowner's exemption, and that child would apply for it and therefore would qualify for the exclusion. And I can answer for Garrett, yes, the recording will be posted on their website. Garrett and his great assistant, Kylie, are going to send it to me, and I'll be posting it on my social media sites as well with a link to it. The next question is, my trust lawyer said I should transfer my property from my revocable living trust to an irrevocable trust. That can be an issue. So before you do that, you're going to want to talk to your local assessor and understand why you're doing it and what it means when you do that. That can trigger something which will not make the parent to child exclusion available. So that is a very important change. There was a reason to do irrevocable trust back before April of 2021, but there's no reason to do that anymore in terms of Proposition 19. It doesn't help you to qualify under the old rules anymore. So you can do that, but you should be very careful and do talk to your local assessor before you do that to make sure that you're not throwing some kind of a stumbling block in your way to qualify. The next question is, if a parent dies with a trust and leaves it to the children, do they keep the same with the name of the trust and there is no adjustment? Well, first of all, you can leave property in a trust. At some point, you're going to want to take it out because the trust is the parent's trust. It's not the children's trust. And you're going to have to get a successor trustee on title before you can sell it. Then they don't have to keep the name of the trust. So let's say John and Jane Jones are the trustees. They both pass away. Their daughter is Angela Jones. She's the successor trustee. If it was their principal residence, Angela, as soon as they pass away, would file her homeowner's exemption and then would be able to, would file an affidavit of death of trustee, would become the successor trustee, and then would transfer the property to her own trust or to herself as an individual. That's fine. It doesn't have to stay in the parent's trust. It can come out. That does not affect the exclusion. So everybody, there's another question. How does Prop 13 affect the transfer base if the parent has the home with that benefit? So most people in California don't understand that we all have a Prop 13 base year value. If you buy in 2022, you get a new Prop 13 base year value based on your purchase price. And as markets go up, you're protected by Prop 13, just like someone who had Prop 13 back in 1978. So everyone gets a Prop 13 base year value. It doesn't matter when the property was purchased. And someone can move their base year value. So a child could inherit under the old parents a child, have a base year value from their parents, and then transfer that base year value under the new rules, as long as it's still their principal residence and their child is going to move into the property. So that's an unusual circumstance. Usually the Prop 13 base year value is not passed on through several generations, but there's no reason it couldn't be under Proposition 19, as long as you qualify as the principal residence on both sides. And Garrett, the question was, when will the recording be available?
Hey, yes, the recording will be available after the meeting. I'll just post it to YouTube as usual, and we'll send out that link to everyone.
Great. Thanks, Kylie. Well, thank you all very much. Garrett, I didn't know if you wanted to say a few remarks to wind up. I'm going to head to the grocery store and go home and have dinner. Garrett, I see a few more questions in the chat. I'm going to ask those people. You've got my email address. Just send those to me directly, and I'll be happy to answer them for you.
Apparently I was on mute, but I was saying you were getting lots of kudos in the chat, and thank you for taking this extra time after your hours to present this to our group. We really appreciate it. Thanks, John.